Setting themselves apart, the two Democrats in the runoff for the lieutenant governor nomination explain why they are the best choice for voters. Plus,
but there is no doubt that tariffs had an impact as automobile prices have gone up.
We're talking about the tariff impact 1 year since President Trump started the program. We're going to revisit a local car dealer to talk about the changes they had to make to keep customers buying vehicles. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ken Molestina in for Jack Fink this week. Eye on Politics starts right now. We start this week with the race for lieutenant governor in our state. The primary runoff election will be held on May 26, and Democrats need to choose a candidate to challenge the Republican incumbent, Dan Patrick. State Representative Vicki Goodwin was the top vote getter in the March primary, but she didn't receive the 50% plus one to win the race outright. So instead, now she will face Labor leader Marcos Velez, who received 31% of the vote. Eye on Politics reporter Jack Fink sat down with the candidates to talk about their strategy for the primary runoff election. We begin with Vicki Goodwin.
And when I tell people that I got the endorsement of the 5 major newspapers for my experience, that I have run for office before, flipped my House seat in 2018, and have served 4 terms in the Texas legislature, building a lot of relationships with other House members and senators, most people understand that experience is really going to be relevant when I step into the lieutenant governor role.
Let me ask you, because there was a 3rd candidate in the race on March 3rd. What are you doing to support Courtney Head's supporters?
I think she earned a lot of her support through social media, and so I too have been working hard to reach out to let people of all ages know that I want to make Texas a better place economically. Her issues really, I think, were the same as mine, but her focus was we need more representation for young people. And as I travel around this state, one of the issues is affordability, in particular housing affordability. And so I talk about the fact that I tried to work on putting downward pressure on rent prices through a bill that I had last session, tried to expand an existing program called Texas Homes for Heroes to allow for down payment assistance and low interest rate loans for teachers and first responders, and just things that would help younger people in the state of Texas.
And you talked a little bit before, but what are your biggest contrasts with Velez? Because voters are going to have to decide between the two of you, whether it be policy or experience, etc.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's putting a focus on raising the minimum wage, which I have actually filed a bill to raise the minimum wage all 4 sessions that I've been in the legislature, and I haven't ever seen him come to my office to advocate to help on that bill. So my issues are also economic, but I believe that by having a strong public education system, that provides those economic opportunities for people. And so my number one issue has been to increase spending to public schools, to end the voucher scam, to help people with their health care. You know, we have a broken healthcare system, and I don't know if he talks about that as one of his higher issues. Really, when I've heard him speak, he mainly focuses on raising the minimum wage. And I think that's important too, but I think there's a lot of really important issues that impact people in their daily lives, and healthcare is one of them.
You talked a little bit about healthcare and public schools. So how would you go about improving healthcare in the state of Texas?
So we just came out with some information about Texas having the highest rate of maternal mortality. That is just unacceptable. And a lot of Black women in particular lose their lives from pregnancy-related issues. We should have better understanding of why that is and then address the problem. We have a lot of people in Texas. In fact, Texas has the highest rate of uninsured who don't have the ability to go see a doctor, and they put it off because they're afraid of that expense. So they may put it off until they end up in the emergency room, and that's where care is most expensive and where the outcomes aren't as good. So we need to make sure people have the opportunity to go see a doctor when they need to see a doctor and make it affordable. So if they don't have employer coverage, there should be a state plan. I know a lot of people ask me about expanding Medicaid, and I would be for that, but there are a lot of issues with Medicaid expansion too. You know, doctors say that the reimbursement rate doesn't cover their cost of care, that oftentimes they aren't reimbursed for months on end, and sometimes that money is clawed back. And so why not come up with a Texas plan that serves the people of Texas?
And so have you any other ideas as how you develop that, where, you know, it's not Medicaid because of the problems that you just raised, but, you know, what do you think could work? What have you heard?
Well, I think talking to doctors and people that have worked on healthcare issues is important, bringing in nurses and then consumers too. But also, I recently had the opportunity to bring in a man who started a new health insurance company in Texas. His does focus on employer-based health coverage, but his ideas are good and could be useful for creating that Texas plan.
Well, now Jack goes one-on-one with Marcos Velez.
We had a very short amount of time to build support for the campaign, and so we campaigned really hard in areas where Democrats have been unsuccessful. Now we've expanded our focus, and we're spending more time in the big cities, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, but obviously not forgetting the RGV and the Panhandle.
There was a third candidate in the race, Courtney Head. What are you doing to attract her voters?
We're actually working with Courtney Head. Courtney endorsed me. Very honored to earn her endorsement, and so we're collaborating with her as we move forward.
What is your game plan now I know you talked a little bit about it before, but as far as your messaging, as far as your issues?
Look, our messaging is not going to change. I think that we're going to continue to campaign on a message of economic populism, raising wages, expanding opportunities, lowering costs. Those are things that matter to Texans right now. I think those are the most pressing issues in this race, and we're going to continue to lean into that messaging because it's where our values lie.
You talked a little bit before about being endorsed by Courtney Head. Because people always like to know, you know, the endorsements. Who else has endorsed you?
We've been endorsed by labor organizations. We've been endorsed by organizations that represent the LGBTQ plus community. We've been endorsed by candidates like Colin Allred. And so I think it says that we're building a powerful grassroots campaign that is attracting the interest of everyday working people who are tired of establishment politicians. But we're also endorsed and earning the respect of candidates that have progressive values because they understand that a campaign like ours is one that benefits working people.
What are your biggest contrasts with Representative Goodwin?
I think lived experience. I have a heavy focus on the realities for middle class, working class people because I am one. I always tell people, very proud to be the lowest net worth candidate in the race, and I think that keeps me grounded in reality. I think one of the problems is Austin is not Texas, and so if we're unsuccessful in our bid, you're going to have a very Austin heavy ticket. I think when you look at your average everyday Texan, they don't identify with what goes on in Austin. They identify with their, portion of the state. I think Houston, being one of the most diverse cities within the state, is a good representation of the needs of many Texans, but also the fact that I work all over the state, it keeps me grounded and connected to people in small towns like Claude or Harper or Mountain Home, all the way to the big cities like Houston and Dallas.
So you're running as an outsider?
Definitely an outsider.
But as far as her legislative experience, she has talked a lot about her legislative experience being there, working in the House, and then also with senators to pass legislation. Does that concern you that that's something that voters will want?
I don't think it concerns me at all, because when you look at the role of the lieutenant governor is more primarily a negotiator. I'm a professional negotiator. I do that every single day with an organized labor against heavy corporate interests, the same interests that we're going to be fighting against in the Texas Senate. If I was running for a position within the Texas House, I believe that legislative experience would be more important. But when you look at what's needed within the lieutenant governor's office, we need someone that understands the needs of working Texans, the struggles of working Texans, that's going to prioritize legislation that benefits working Texans.
Such as?
Raising the state minimum wage, expanding affordable housing. I mean, I could go on and on. Look, better funding for teachers, better funding for our public schools, making sure that we give teachers the right to collectively bargain, things that would actually improve the living standards for normal everyday Texans.
You listed a whole bunch of topics, but I'm wondering if you had to choose your top 2 or 3 priorities, what are they?
My number one priority is always going to be raising the state minimum wage. Even if you don't make minimum wage, your employer keeps a certain gap between what you earn and what the minimum wage is. And so a rising tide lifts all boats. If we can raise wages, that'll combat some of these soaring costs. And then obviously when you look at a strong number 2, we have to make sure that we properly fund education. The public school system's in a disarray. It's really a disservice to our teachers. They're educators. They go into a profession. They should earn a living wage. They should have the resource they need to teach. They shouldn't be persecuted by the state because they deviate from some plan that the state has laid out. And then third is healthcare access. We have way too many Texans that are suffering from a lack of access to healthcare, a lack of health insurance. I have people within my own family that are suffering the ill effects of that. And so I think it's really important that we focus on those 3 issues.
And of course, the winner will face incumbent Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who easily cruised to the victory in the March Republican primary election. Patrick is hoping to capture his 4th term now in office. Special investigative committees in both the Texas House and the Senate will meet in Austin on Monday, and on Tuesday they're going to hear testimony now about the deadly Hill Country flooding disaster from July 4th of last year. Some committee members visited the Kerrville area earlier this month to get a first-hand look at Camp Mystic. That's where 27 children and 2 adults died in flash flooding. In Kerr County alone, 119 people died during the 4th of July floods last year. Lawmakers are looking at the circumstances surrounding the flooding and what legislation is needed now to try and prevent a disaster like that from ever happening in the future. Early voting wraps up Tuesday for the May 2nd municipal elections across North Texas. Polling locations on Monday and on Tuesday will be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Now, some of the big races that we're going to be watching include the record $6.2 billion Dallas ISD bond election to primarily address aging school buildings. Fort Worth City voters will decide the fate of $845 million worth of bonds to address streets and other issues, plus the future of DART service in Addison, Highland Park, and University Park. They will also be decided. And in some cities, voters will decide who will be mayor and others on city council. In Arlington, current mayor Jim Ross wants a 3rd and a final term. But Jack Fink tells us there is competition for who will lead Arlington in the future.
Arlington Mayor Jim Ross says residents should rehire him because of the city's continued economic development and job growth since he was elected in June of 2021.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And Arlington is anything but broke right now. We are thriving.
But Steve Cavender, who says he supported Ross 5 years ago, had a change of heart and is running against him.
I saw some things I didn't like, and it was completely different than what he had told everybody he would do before he ran for mayor.
Such as?
Such as being transparent, working with people, working with getting advice from others.
Cavender criticizes Ross and council members for voting to raise property tax rates for 2 years, including the latest increase by 3 cents to nearly 63 cents per $100 valuation. The mayor said the city had to make up for a $25 million shortfall, and while they cut $15 million from the budget, they still had to close the remaining gap.
What people don't want to talk about is for the first 3 years I was mayor, we lowered property tax.
People are going to say, you could have cut more. Why didn't you cut more so that we wouldn't have to have a property rate increase?
Because people don't want us to cut into the valuable services that we have. And that means police and fire and trash and water.
And I don't think the citizens should have to bear the brunt of increased property taxes out of their pocket.
So what would you have done differently?
If I had been there, I would have told the city manager to present the council and the mayor to present us a balanced budget that doesn't require property tax increase.
They both support extending the Dallas Cowboys lease at AT&T Stadium another 15 years until 2055 and allow the city to use $273 million in sales taxes it already collects from its sports arenas for maintenance and security improvements. The council is set to vote on the issue tomorrow, but Ross and Cavender are split over whether voters should have the final say.
Do we want the public to weigh in on critical issues? Absolutely. But in this particular case, the public has weighed in already, and we are doing exactly what the public has told us to do.
I think they should vote. I think our citizens are smart enough. They know how good the Cowboys are to our city.
Arlington City Council members voted last Tuesday night to approve the improvements without sending it to the voters.
Well, two other candidates are running for Arlington mayor, Sean Mallory and Hunter Crow. After next Saturday's election, there will be new mayors in at least 3 cities, Frisco, Irving, and Keller. The current mayors either were term limited or they ran for another office. Polls for Election Day on Saturday, May 2nd will be open from 7 a.m. 7 p.m. We're going to have results for you online after the polls close and a reaction for you on the news at 10 p.m. that day. Let's go ahead and fast forward now to the primary runoff election on May 26th. This is another chapter now in the debate over how Dallas County will hold that particular election. A shakeup in Dallas County GOP leadership could put the decision in the hands of a judge, with the runoff election less than a month away. In the March primary election, Dallas County Republicans wanted precinct-based voting on Election Day. It led to some voter confusion. Alan West, who is now the former Dallas County GOP chair, agreed to end the precinct-only voting for the runoff election. However, the county GOP leadership committee is asking the court to appeal to block that agreement. For now, Dallas County Elections is going ahead with county-wide vote centers on Election Day, May 26, until it hears otherwise. Of course, stay tuned for that, and we'll update you as soon as we hear something. President Trump's tariffs this past year, they have reportedly cost the auto industry about $35 million. Last year, on the day the president announced his tariff program, Jack Fink spoke with Don Herring. He's the owner of 2 Mitsubishi dealerships right here in North Texas. Herring tells us in the year before tariffs, his used car sales were nearly half of his business at Irving dealerships. Now, 1 year later, they're nearly 3/4 of his business. Jack went back to speak with Herring about the impact that the tariffs have had on his dealerships and on customers.
There is no doubt that tariffs had an impact as automobile prices have gone up. And the factories have worked really hard in 2026 to find ways to help mitigate that. And affordability is the big word of the day in the automotive industry today.
So even among automakers, affordability is a key issue.
Affordability is a key issue. We've seen Mitsubishi come out with products that's decontented, that has less content than the products they had pre-tariff, but the prices are in line with what the products they had pre-tariff.
So give me an example.
So, for example, our Outlander Sport pre-tariff had about a $25,000 price range. After the tariffs hit, they increased the price, they increased the destination, and we saw that price of that car go up a couple of $1,000s. They came out with a new Outlander Sport S model, which gets rid of the 18-inch alloy wheels, put some 16-inch steel wheels and hubcaps like a lot of people remember. But now it's got a $24,995 price tag again. So you lose the alloy wheels, but the price is what that car was before the tariff.
And what model was that?
That's the Outlander Sport S model.
Okay. And then you had another vehicle.
And then we have the Outlander LE model, which looks a lot like and has a lot of the same equipment as the pre-tariff Outlander Black Edition. And they cost exactly the same. The difference is this Outlander LE model doesn't have Mitsubishi's My Pilot Assist, which is their adaptive cruise control system. It has a standard traditional type cruise control.
And so it's almost more like you're giving people a choice. Hey, you don't want to spend as much, here's the option, and have customers noticed, and have they chosen the cheaper options?
And the Outlander Sport, which is the less expensive of the 2 cars, we've seen people choosing the less expensive option. They seem to be more conscious about price than what wheels are on the car. We're probably still selling more of the higher model Outlanders than we are the new Outlander LE. But the factories, and it's not just Mitsubishi, all the factories are really focused on affordability. And whether that's rebates, whether that's subvented interest rates, whether that's new decontented models like Mitsubishi's doing, a lot of other manufacturers are also coming out with lower models that have a little bit less spec, so they can keep the prices similar to what we had pre-tariff.
Well, starting last Monday, the Trump administration began processing an estimated $166 to $175 billion, all of it in tariff refunds for American businesses. But the rollout is running into some problems. Sarah Jenkins explains in this week's brief.
The refunds stem from tariffs imposed last April on what President Trump called Liberation Day. Those tariffs were enacted under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. But after a legal challenge, the Supreme Court ruled the tariffs were unlawful, leaving many businesses and ultimately consumers to absorb the added costs. Now companies can request refunds through a new federal portal known as CAPE. That's short for the Consolidated Administration and Processing of Entries. Once Customs and Border Protection approves a claim, payments are expected to take about 60 to 90 days. Some of the largest carriers, including UPS, FedEx, and DHL, say they'll pass refunds back to customers who paid the higher tariff-related fees. But multiple company executives tell CBS News they've encountered errors and technical issues while trying to submit claims through the new online system. Businesses say they're hoping the system stabilizes as more claims come in. For The Brief, I'm Sarah Jenkins.
Well, you can watch all of Jack's full interviews from today's program on our CBS Texas YouTube page. All you have to do is look for the Eye on Politics playlist and hit the subscribe button. That's all for Eye on Politics for this Sunday. Thank you so much for watching. Jack Fink will be back next week. From all of us here at CBS News Texas, I'm Ken Molestina, and we are listening to you.